Do you sound rude when you speak English? I know this is a big worry that a lot of people have, especially when we talk about British English, because there is quite a lot you have to do to avoid being rude and sound polite. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about that. I will be sharing a few different phrases and expressions that you can add on to the beginning of your sentence to sound more polite when you're asking for a request, you're asking for something, you want directions, you want some help, or you're just, telling someone something very simply, very plainly. So there's a lot we could talk about today, and I know it's going to be very useful, so I hope that you enjoy it. With each phrase that I mention as well, I'm going to try my best to give an example from my own life, as I often like to do, just to make it more, I suppose, give it more context, make it feel more real to you. And also, I will be giving you a question as well. I like to do that as well. So you can either answer the question in your head, when you're walking the dog or on the way to work, or you can leave a comment, get in touch with me. I always love to see your ideas and your thoughts to these episodes as well. So yeah, feel free to answer in writing to me as well. That would be cool to hear. And don't forget, as we have been doing recently, I'm going to go through the main episode today, and then at the end, we're going to have a little bit of a chill time where I give you some updates from me and Level Up English. I will also share with you some quote and reviews from the podcast and a lot of stuff like that. So don't forget to stick around until the end. But now let's get into the episode. This is the Level Up English podcast, the best place to come to level up and improve your English one day at a time. My name is Michael, your host and your teacher for the day. Let's get started. So this episode all started with one expression. This is one that I realized we use all the time, or at least I use all the time when I'm in the UK, and it sounds very polite to me. It's a very simple expression, and in fact it's so short that you may even not notice it when people say it in conversation. And this is the phrase, could I just? Could I just? Right, so this is often added to the beginning of a sentence, and it kind of makes the request feel smaller. We often use this word just when we're requesting or asking something, and it makes it feel like, oh, it's not a big deal, it's just a tiny thing, it's very small. So a very common way is, could I just squeeze by? You may learn in a textbook to say, excuse me, which is fine. Excuse me can be polite, but I always say you should be very careful with that phrase, excuse me. I don't like to say it too much in the UK because if you use the wrong tone, it can very easily sound rude. Excuse me is often used in a rude or sarcastic way as well. So yeah, you have to be very careful with that phrase. So yeah, unless you want to sound really happy, like, excuse me. Like, if you raise your voice, you sound very non-threatening, that's fine. But otherwise, I think this is a great phrase to use instead. Could I just squeeze by? Right, we use the word squeeze like you're, going past someone and you don't want to take up too much room. You're not asking them to move all the way out the way, if that makes sense. Could I just squeeze by a second? A second just means it will only be 1 second. It won't take any much of your time, really. So that's a common one. Could I just? I was thinking of an example for this one from my life, and a weird memory came to my mind from maybe 5 years ago when I was living in Torquay in England, and I did a lot of cycling there. It's a great place for cycling. You can cycle along the coast, along the sea, and there are many places in the UK where cycling is allowed on the pavement. So you can cycle and walk on the same path. Honestly, I don't know if you were allowed to cycle on this pavement. I think at that time I was still quite scared to cycle on the road. So I would cycle on the pavement and, maybe it wasn't allowed, but I would often get in the way of people. And yeah, that's what I did back then when I was a bit younger. I'm a little bit more careful with the rules these days. But I remember there was one moment where I got stuck behind a lot of people and I couldn't go around them because the pavement was too narrow. And I was waiting there very politely because I was aware that, okay, I'm probably not supposed to be here. So therefore, I'm not going to push past them. I'm not going to say, excuse me, because I feel like they have the right of way, which means legally they're allowed to be here and I'm not. I think that's the case. So I was waiting there quite patiently, and another guy also on his bike came up behind me and just shouted, "Excuse me!" And he said to me, "You got to say something, else you'll be here forever. You've got to speak up, else you'll be here forever." And I didn't really reply to him because I was kind of thinking, like, how could I reply? And then, the second I thought of what to say, he was long gone. He was in a rush, maybe. But maybe I disagreed. I thought, well, they're on the pavement. I'm on the pavement. It's for walking. We should walk. But yeah, he was like very outgoing or very outspoken, I suppose is the word. He didn't mind speaking what he wanted to do. But yeah, I felt like it was a bit rude. That came to my mind. And I think a better phrase would have been, "Sorry, could I just squeeze by? Could I just squeeze by here?" And I think if I said it in that way, I'm sure they would have had no problem with me squeezing by, right? So I guess there's two ways to approach the situation. But my question for you is, what would you do in that situation? If you're on a bicycle and you're stuck behind people on the pavement, would you shout like that guy did? Would you say, "Could I just squeeze by?" Or would you do what I did and just wait for them to walk and wait for the pavement to get wider? What would you do? Interesting problem there. But yeah, could I just? I also mentioned the word sorry just now, and we will come back to that later as well. The next one is a little bit similar. This is, would you mind? Would you mind? And I'm going to try my best to share these in a natural way as well. So for teaching, I might say, would you mind? But naturally, on the street, I might say it much faster, like, would you mind? Would you mind? Would you mind? We have that, would you mind? Would you mind? It sounds a bit strange the more you say it, right? So this is just a nice way to ask someone to do something for you that might be a bit rude otherwise. So, for example, I'm getting quite hot. If I just said, "Hey, open the window," or "Open the window, please," it's quite rude, even if you add "please," because it sounds like you're not giving them an option. So, okay, you're polite, you said please, but it's still a demand. It's not a question, it's a demand. If you add "would you mind," it kind of sounds like they have the option to say no. No, I don't want to do that. It would be kind of awkward to say no, but at least the feeling is there. It's more polite. So yeah, would you mind opening the window? So open the window, or would you mind opening? The reason we say opening, by the way, is because after the word mind, when that's a verb, to mind something, we always use a gerund, which is an ing verb. So would you mind doing? Would you mind helping? Use that ing after the word mind. Would you mind opening the window? And what's confusing about this is there are two ways to answer, and it can be very confusing. So even for native English speakers, this is a confusing part of English. So would you mind, blah, blah, blah. If you said yes, that can mean I do mind, which means I don't want to do it. Would you mind helping me? Yes, I would mind, which means I would be annoyed to help you. So sometimes they might say yes, but that means no. Very confusing, right? I think this is getting less common, honestly, because it is confusing. So generally, if you say yes, that means yes. If you say no, that means no. But yeah, would you mind opening the window? If they just said, yeah, that probably means they're happy to open it. It's really by the tone of their voice. If they said, actually, yes, I would mind. You can tell there, they sound a bit angry, right? So that kind of means no. But yeah, generally, they will say yes and no in the normal way. It's just something interesting, something to take note of. But yeah, if you are confused by the answer, It's not just a learner problem. It's an English problem, really. So, yeah, would you mind opening the window? No, I don't want to open it. You could also say that. But yeah, usually they'd say, yeah, sure, no problem. Or, no, I don't mind. Again, I said no, but that means I can do it. It's no problem for me. So again, the tone of your voice is very important. No, I don't mind at all. I'm happy to help, right? Anyway, my example, I had another memory. I've got a lot of memories today. This one was actually even before that previous example. And I was living in one of my first flats when I moved out in my early 20s. It wasn't very nice, and this area had a lot of sketchy people in the area. Sketchy means possibly dangerous. They look a bit dangerous. And, a lot of flats in the UK, they are shared buildings. So my building, it had a upstairs and a downstairs. I lived in the downstairs. I don't know who lived upstairs, but someone else did. And we had a bin area where we put our rubbish, which was right next to my window. And it was a really horrible layout. When I first moved in, there was a huge pile of bins, and the smell was coming through into my bedroom. It was really, really disgusting. It wasn't my rubbish, of course. So I spent a long time getting rid of all this rubbish and cleaning that area with bleach just to make it clean so I could sleep at night. It was a real nightmare. And, I put a lot of work into that area. I made it clean and nice. And then, for a few nights, I smelled a very bad smell. It was the smell of people smoking, but it wasn't a normal cigarette. It was an illegal cigarette. It's illegal in the UK to smoke this thing. And, of course, I wasn't very happy. I don't want any smoke coming into my bedroom. And yeah, it doesn't really matter what smoke it is, but of course I don't want it in my lungs when I'm trying to sleep. So I was very annoyed at this. I'm not an outspoken person normally, but this crossed the line, which means this was too far. It was too much for me to accept. So I opened my bedroom window. There was two guys smoking there. And I said, kind of polite, but also in a stern, angry voice, I actually said, I don't mind you smoking. I've got no problem with you smoking, but would you mind not smoking here? Because this is my bedroom and the smell comes through the window. Right. I think that's quite a nice way to deal with it. I was polite, but I was firm. And, in many cases in English, we will use a lot of these polite phrases to make, I guess the polite phrases can suggest that we are actually a little bit angry. It's a strange feeling, but sometimes if you use too many polite phrases, you sound a bit angry. It's what we call passive aggressive. It's like you're angry, but it's kind of hidden behind all these phrases. So yeah, I said, would you mind smoking somewhere else? Would you mind smoking somewhere else? And again, it sounds polite because I said, would you mind? But my tone of voice, again, very important, the tone of my voice suggested that it wasn't a real suggestion. It was more of a, you need to move, you need to go. And, typical me, being very timid, I have a timid nature. I felt good that they left and I didn't have the smoke anymore, but my heart was racing so much because I never really speak up in that kind of confrontational way. My heart was beating quick and I couldn't sleep because my heart was racing. So yeah, I guess I need to practice more, speaking up for myself, but that was a funny memory for me, quite a scary one in some ways. So yeah, I guess my question for you more generally is, what is your view on smoking in public? Whether it's illegal things or legal cigarettes. What's your view on that? I'm personally not a fan. If you want to smoke, that's your choice, but it's not my choice to have your smoke in my face. Just my opinion. What do you think? Okay, let's go to the next one now. Do you mind if? Okay, this one is a bit weirder when I say it quickly. This is do you mind if? Very similar to the previous one because we are using mind. We say do you rather than would you. You could say would, but it's just a different example. And we say if. So that's interesting because we often use if in a polite phrase in a yes or no question. So, do you mind if I sit here? Very common example, very simple request, right? And yeah, again, naturally, in a real situation, I might say it much faster, and it might sound like this. Do you mind if I sit here? Do you mind if I sit here? So, do you mind, in British English, often gets shortened to do you mind? Do you mind if? Right, do you mind? Do you mind? Very strange, right? But once you get used to that, you hear it a lot. Do you mind if I sit here? Is that okay? Very natural, very good question. And yeah, I guess my example for this one is thinking about trains and buses. When I went to the UK in the summer, I took a lot of trains and buses and coaches. And, trains, there's usually space on a train. Coaches, it's not so much. I think recently because the cost of train travel in the UK is so expensive, it's much cheaper to travel to France than it is to go to London in the UK. It's crazy. Because of that, a lot more people are taking a coach now. So if I want to go from Cornwall to London, I might take a bus, and it's a bit cheaper. But yeah, because of that, the buses are usually full. They don't have much space. So usually I'll get on and there is no double seat available. It's only seats on the aisle seats next to someone else, right? And, I think it's polite to ask. Not everyone asks, but I think usually I like to say, excuse me, do you mind if I sit here? And they'll, yeah, sure, yeah, no problem. And I think it's obvious that I will sit here because it's the only seat available on the bus, right? So it's not really a question, it's just a polite thing, just to show that we have considered the other person's feelings. It's kind of part of British culture, I would say. So yeah, that's my example. Nothing that interesting, but a little cultural insight, perhaps. And my question for you is an opinion. I want your opinion on this. So sometimes, it's very common, I think this is all around the world, right? People will put their bag or put an item in the seat next to them to discourage people from sitting in that seat. I think most of us will agree that's not a very nice thing to do. It's not a respectful thing to do. I hate it when I'm looking for a seat and they're all covered by bags. It's very rude, in my opinion. But I guess I want to ask, what's your opinion on this? I will tell you what I sometimes try to do. I don't like to cover the seat, but I try to play with psychology a little bit. So sometimes I will have something that I own slightly covering the seat. So maybe I've got like a jumper on my lap, and the sleeve of my jumper is going over the seat, the empty seat next to me. So it's not obstructing the seat. Someone could still sit down, but when they look at the seat, there's two seats, there's this one and there's one behind next to another person. I feel like if they're going to choose between these seats, they're more likely to choose the seat without a sleeve covering part of the seat, I hope you know what I'm saying. So that's my feeling. And of course, sometimes it doesn't work and people still sit down, and I will quickly, move my stuff out of the way so they can sit down. But yeah, I do kind of wonder, is that rude? Yeah, I'm not stopping them from sitting down. I'm just trying to trick them, psychologically, not to sit here. Because I don't want, it's annoying, of course, and, maybe they're sick and they'll get me sick as well. But yeah, so I guess that's my second question. Am I bad? Is that a bad thing to do? Or do you support my, 10% blocking of the seat? Let me know what you think. And maybe if you have another method of dissuading someone from sitting down, also let me know. By the way, dissuading is the opposite of persuading. It's trying to get someone not to do something. Usually with speech, but in this case it's not. It's an action, right? Okay, A couple more now. Sorry. We mentioned sorry before, but I think it's important to mention this word. It's a bit different because it's just one word here. It's really useful for minor problems, very small interruptions. And I think it's really important to say that sorry doesn't actually mean that you're apologizing. It doesn't mean that you feel sorry. I think this is one misconception. It's one misunderstanding that many people have. I think even sometimes Americans who also speak the same language, they misunderstand how much we use sorry. We're not saying I am sorry. It's just a polite, kind of meaningless word, usually. So I suppose one way to think of it is it's a replacement for the word or the phrase, excuse me. I would say sorry is even more common than excuse me. So I go into a shopping center. There is someone sitting at the desk, the help desk, information desk. I would say, sorry, could I ask a question? Sorry, could I ask a question? Right, so sorry, I'm not really sorry. It's just, I suppose I'm saying, sorry for taking your time, but I want to ask you a question. Yeah, sorry, could I ask a question? Or, it's a very busy street and you say, ooh, sorry, I didn't mean to bump into you. Sorry, I didn't mean to bump into you. But I suppose this one is more of a proper sorry. You're actually apologizing, right? So I guess there's two examples of how sorry can be used. And my example here is remembering people's names. I do this almost every time I meet someone. Usually I'll have a conversation with them. Even the conversation could last, 2 hours. We're talking for 2 hours. I'm getting to know this person, where they're from, what they do. And then right before we say goodbye, I'll say, oh, sorry, what was your name again? Or, sorry, remind me what your name was again? That's a very polite polite way to phrase it. Sorry, remind me your name again. Something like that. And I think this is quite funny. I don't know if this is just a British thing. I know like all around the world, it can be very hard to remember people's names, especially if you're focused on their life story. A name is just a sound at the end of the day. But I did have a student the other day in one of our private coaching sessions that we did, who might be listening to this. So hello if you are. And he mentioned something interesting about his observation that British people often don't focus too much on names. You might meet someone a few times and you never really ask them for their name, which I think is true. Like when I think of meeting people, I don't really care much about their name, and I don't remember to ask it. I've met many people where we've spoken for a while and I never knew their name. And I think one consideration is if I know that we're not going to meet again, I'm talking to someone at the bus stop, like I did a few weeks ago. I didn't ask for his name because I know I'm not going to see him again. So why do I need to know his name? That was my feeling. And again, I don't know if this is a British thing or maybe more general thing. So my question for you is, when you meet someone, do you ask for their name? How important is it to exchange names? Are you focused on the name, or are you more focused on, getting to know the person behind the name? So let me know your views on that. But yeah, if you do forget the name, just simple question, doesn't have to be awkward. Oh, I'm really sorry. Remind me your name again. Sorry, remind me your name. Very good question to ask. Okay, I think we'll do a few more now. And I think this next section will be maybe for slightly bigger things. A lot of the questions we've covered so far have been more like everyday little things, like, sorry, could I squeeze by? But I think some of these are more useful for bigger asks now. So this one is a bit longer. Would it be alright if? We have that word if again. Would it be alright if I borrowed your pen? Would that be alright? So in this sentence, maybe it sounds like it's more of a kind of a big ask. We're not sure if it's okay. So yeah, would it be alright if I did this thing? Are you sure that's okay? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a bigger inconvenience maybe. So To be honest, though, even though the answer is probably going to be yes, we still ask it just to be polite. If I go to my friend's house, well, maybe not a friend. Like, if I go to my friend's house, I will just use the bathroom. I don't really need to ask them because we've been friends for many years. But if it's a new friend or someone I am less familiar with, I would say, would it be alright if I used your toilet? Would it be alright if I used your toilet? And I think it's just polite. I think, only 1% of the time people will say no. Or even less. Like, why would you say no? If someone needs a toilet, of course, they have to go, right? So I think they'll always say yes, but we still ask the question as if they might say no, because it's polite. And my example of this, I've got a funny or embarrassing story to share with this one now. So this was maybe 3 years ago, maybe. I had some workers coming to my house and they were installing a carpet in the house. So they were working for for most of the day. And of course, they had to use the bathroom. They did ask. They said, would it be all right if I used the toilet? I said, yeah, of course. Go ahead. And at the end of the day, I went into the bathroom and I saw liquid all over the toilet seat. Right, so I saw liquid over the toilet seat. I was very annoyed. They peed all over the seat. How could they do this? Oh, it's so annoying. I was very annoyed. So then the next day I got an automatic email from this company asking for feedback. Just how did we do? Let us know, give us your feedback. So I said it was good. The service was good. The carpet is, I'm happy with the carpet. It was fine. But the only downside is the workers peed on my toilet seat. And yeah, that's a bit annoying. I don't mind them using the bathroom, but I wish they cleaned up after themselves. And a few hours later, I received a phone call. And I answered it, not knowing who it was. They said, oh, okay, so we received your feedback about the toilet incident. And we just want to let you know we're very sorry. We're going to talk to them and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. And they couldn't see me, but at that moment I went bright red. I was very embarrassed. And I just kind of said, to be honest, I thought that was anonymous feedback. I didn't know that you would know I wrote it. I thought it would be like a secret. Like, I don't know how they knew it was me, but maybe it was attached to my email or something. So I was quite embarrassed. And I said, it's not really a big deal. It was just the one thing that I was displeased with. And I also did say, I don't want any awkward feelings. So please, if you do let them know, please make it anonymous. I don't want them to know that I complained about it. But yeah, so the next time they came back, they did come back because there was a problem. There was one little bit of carpet that needed to be fixed. It hadn't been done properly. And they came back and the workers were suspiciously friendly. They were really, really, really nice. They were super helpful and friendly. They were nice the first time, but they were much nicer the second time. And to me, it was obvious that they had been told about the complaint, and maybe they weren't told it was me, but maybe they guessed it was me based on the timing. I think they knew it was me. So I kind of felt very awkward. I was being nice, but there was this elephant in the room. Very good expression here, by the way. If there's an elephant in the room, the elephant represents a very big topic that everyone is ignoring, right? There was an elephant in the room. There was a big thing that we were all thinking about, but no one was talking about. So no one spoke about the elephant in the room. And it was very awkward. And I guess nothing else really happened, but I regretted leaving the feedback. I think my lesson from this is, if I do leave feedback, make sure it's truly anonymous. But yeah, I don't know if you agree with my handling of the situation. Oh, and to make matters worse, after reflecting on the situation a few days later, I was thinking about it and I thought, how do I know that that was definitely pee? It could be, for example, they washed their hands and they shook their hands and the water from their hands landed on the toilet. And when I realized that is a possibility, I felt even worse. I was like, oh no, what if I caused all this problem and it wasn't even a problem to begin with? So sometimes we do cause more problems for ourselves just by, sometimes it's easier just to move on, right? I think that was my main lesson from that situation. So that was my long story. I hope that you found it interesting. So my question for you is quite simple. Would you be happy with other people using your bathroom? Different situations, of course. Workers doing work in your house, friends coming to your house. Probably that's fine, right? What about a neighbor that you don't really know very well, and they said, oh, my house is still 5 minutes away. I'm not home yet, but I can't wait anymore. Can I use your bathroom? Else I'm gonna, have an accident. Would you let them in your house in that case? That's a little bit more awkward, right? Let me know your views on that. But yeah, very specific situation. But okay. I was wondering if you've heard of this next one. Did you notice I just mentioned it there? This next one is I was wondering if. Very similar. Maybe we will not spend too long on this one. But I think what's interesting about this is we're using past tense. So here's an example. I was wondering if you could help me with this. I was wondering. So we're saying wondering, which means kind of thinking. It's not saying, can you help me? It's like, I was thinking before if it's possible. It's very indirect. We're explaining that we were thinking about something before. That's very indirect, isn't it? And the reason we use past tense, I was wondering, also we say could instead of can, past tense adds even more distance. Literally, right? Because we are adding distance in time. We're making this request further away from the present moment. And that makes it sound more polite, right? So I was wondering if you could possibly help me. Using past tense can make your question sound more polite. So a common fear that I have is going into a restaurant and I see the menu and I see there are no vegan options. There's nothing that I can have. And that is very annoying when I'm with a big group of people. Of course, if it's just a small group, they're usually happy to go somewhere that also has options for me. But otherwise, it's very annoying. And I really hate to be that person who asks for changes to the menu. Could I have this one, but no cheese, no this, and I find those people can be very annoying, and I like to avoid doing that. Of course, if you have an allergy, it's a different situation, right? But if it's just a preference, I feel like I'm very aware that people can be annoyed by those people. So I like to avoid it, but sometimes it's unavoidable. So I might say to the waiter, I was wondering if I could order this one without cheese. I might say that. I was wondering if I could get this without cheese. It's not a good feeling to be the fussy one at the table where everyone else is quite simple, but it does happen sometimes. So yeah, my question to you is, do you think menu changes are okay? Do you think it's okay to, get the cheeseburger without the cheese, or order a pizza but change the toppings on the menu? Is that okay? Maybe it depends on the restaurant, but yeah, let me know your views on that. Maybe you're one way or the other, but I think this could be quite controversial. I guess another good phrase in that situation, or a different one, is if it's not too much trouble. If it's not too much trouble. This is another really good one. I would say it's for bigger asks. If you're asking something that is more inconvenient or annoying, this is a good one to ask. So if it's not too much trouble, could you help me carry this heavy box? Right? I am struggling a little bit to think of an example for this one, but maybe like I often take taxis, a lot more here compared to the UK. But if I was in the UK, I might say, oh, if it's not too much trouble, could you drop me on the other side of the road? Maybe the taxi is leaving me in one place, but it's raining and I don't want to get wet. So I say, if it's not too much trouble, could you drop me just over there, 10 meters over there, so I can hop into the door and not get wet. It's a little bit inconvenient for the driver, but hopefully they will understand. And I think in the UK that would usually be fine because I asked in a very polite way. If it's not too much trouble, could you drop me over there? And yeah, that's fine. But I always feel very awkward, in Thailand, for example, in a taxi. I took one just a few days ago, I suppose. And I know Thai is not quite the same as English. The way to be polite is very different, of course. But I also don't know that in Thai. My Thai is not good enough to know the subtleties of being polite. Unlike you guys, because you're learning it today in English. But yeah, I can say thank you and stuff like that. But if something's very inconvenient, I don't really know how to say it in a polite way. So sometimes the taxi will drop me maybe like down the road from where I actually live. Maybe it's like 50 meters or 100 meters from my door. So it's a little bit too far sometimes. Sometimes I just walk because it's easier. But sometimes I kind of want to say, drop me over there. And I know how to say that in Thai. I just say, can you drop me off there, please? Something like that. And so I know how to ask it, but I'm always worried, does that sound rude? I always feel awkward because I want to use the English polite phrases. Like, is it okay? Do you mind? Is it no problem? But I don't know if that would be normal in Thai. And I also wouldn't even know how to say it if it is normal. So that's my issue. But yeah, maybe you can tell me some taxi etiquette, which means politeness. When you take a taxi, what do you do? What do you think is polite, right? Do you talk to the driver? Do you ignore them? Do you ask them to drop you where you want? Or do you just do whatever's easiest for them? Maybe let me know if you have any beliefs or opinions about how to be polite in a taxi. You could let me know. Okay, I think we'll end with one more now, which is a negative. It's, I don't suppose you could... I don't suppose you could. This one is very interesting because literally, I suppose it's saying, I don't think you would be happy to do this unless maybe you would. So you're kind of making the assumption that the other person wouldn't be happy to do it. That's kind of what this literally means. But the actual use is just more like, is it okay? Is this okay? So for example, I don't suppose you could lend me a hand. Notice I said it very naturally there. We often shorten suppose to spose, one syllable, when we're speaking. But I'll say this more slowly. I don't suppose you could lend me a hand. I don't suppose you could lend me a hand. This really just means, could you help me? Right? Lend a hand means to help someone, usually with a physical action. I don't suppose you could lend a hand, could you? So yeah, even though we're kind of saying I don't suppose, it really just means can you help? So the negative makes it more polite. So for my final example for this one, I had another memory come to mind from, where was this? I think it was also that similar time where I was living in Turkey. And Turkey is a beautiful seaside town, but it also has a lot of problems with homelessness, drug abuse, and stuff like that. I've seen, I think, more people in that town using drugs in public than anywhere else in the UK. I'm not saying it's the worst place, just the worst place I have lived in, right? And yeah, because of that, there's a lot of people begging for money and homeless people. And yeah, it's kind of just part of the life there, unfortunately. One of the downsides for them, of course, they're not in a good situation, and for also the feeling of safety for the other people as well. So yeah, I used to go shopping there in Sainsbury's, and outside the shop there would always be a person begging for money. And I don't know, I felt like at the time I wanted to be polite. I want to treat homeless people like people. I think some people just ignore them, which makes them feel horrible, I'm sure. So yeah, one person came to me, one lady came to me, and she started giving me a sob story. Now, this phrase, a sob story, sob means cry. So a sob story is a story that people tell to try to make you feel sympathy for them. They tell it because they want you to feel bad for them, usually because they want something. It's usually, there's a hidden reason, a hidden motive behind it. And yeah, this lady was telling me, oh, hi, sorry to bother you. I'm homeless. I'm looking for a place to stay tonight. Basically, I've been kicked out of my house. And she basically had this whole story about her situation. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't true. I'm not, who am I to judge, right? It's not my place to say whether it was true. But I will say it did sound very rehearsed. It sounded like she has said this story, 1,000 times. But yeah, she said that. I think most people would have just, sorry, don't have time, don't have change, and they just kept walking. But for whatever reason, in this moment, I just felt like I want to be polite and I will listen to her story with some, sympathetic ears, maybe. And it lasted for about 10 minutes. After a few minutes, I felt like, well, this is going on for too long, but she is just talking non-stop. I have no chance to interrupt her politely and just say I want to go home. So I just waited for her to finish. It was literally like 10 minutes talking. And at the end, she said, do you have any change? I opened my wallet. I had no money. So I felt pretty awkward. I suppose I should use the phrase here. She said, I don't suppose you have any change. I don't suppose you have any money to help me get a place for tonight. And I just said, I'm really sorry. I don't have any change on me at all. And I think she kind of felt, I've literally just given you a 10-minute story and you don't have any money for me. Like, kind of like she deserved the money after the story. And I said, no, I'm really sorry. Yeah, that was it, I suppose. That was it. I just walked off and I felt very awkward. So my lesson from this story was, if I don't have money, then don't engage in a conversation. I can say hello, but if I don't have money, there's no point talking anymore because, it was very obvious from the beginning that she wanted money. That was the reason she was talking to me. So yeah, I wasted my time, she wasted her time, and nothing came out of it. So yeah, I guess that's the story there. But yeah, if you're asking for money, it's quite a big thing to ask. So this is a good phrase. I don't suppose you have any change. I don't suppose you have any money. So yeah, my final question for you is a big question, and it's, do you give money to homeless people or beggars? Do you give them money? This might depend on your culture or your country. I think it's very controversial. Of course, it's good to help people who need it. Some people don't like to help people when they might spend it on their addiction, like alcohol or cigarettes. You don't want to keep them, keep supporting an addiction. That's not a good feeling. And the other argument I've seen in Bangkok, there are posters that say, do not give money to beggars. Give money to charities, but if you give money to beggars, it just encourages them to keep begging. And that's an interesting opinion. And that was an official, government poster that I saw in the street. And I wonder if that's true. I think there is an aspect where what we use money on is kind of voting for the kind of world we want. Of course, if you pay someone money, you're kind of saying to them, I support what you're doing, so please continue to do it. Whether it's a donation or you're paying for a service, money is supporting that thing to continue. I never thought about it before in the sense of people begging for money. If you beg for money and you get money, does that mean you are more likely to keep begging because it's working and you're getting money? And if you didn't get money, maybe you'd find another alternative, like with a charity, for example. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't have the answers, but this is just what the poster said on the street. But yeah, let me know your opinion. Maybe you give money to them, or you don't, or maybe it depends. Maybe there's a middle ground somewhere. But I am definitely open to hearing more views on this as well. Okay, there we have it. I think that is a good list to share, and I don't want to go too long today. I know I've been rambling a little bit, but I hope you've enjoyed the list and the stories that go along with them as well. So yeah, just a reminder, here's my little kind of update section at the end, I suppose. I will put these phrases and their examples and some practice on the website for the members. So if you go to the website and you go to these show notes, you should see the practice section if you're a member. And it's always good to review and learn there. Again, feel free to leave a comment on this episode to practice or ask a question as well. This episode you can find at levelupenglish.school/podcast341. We have done so many episodes now, haven't we? But yeah, so just a little update for you. I've been very busy recently. Maybe by the redness of my eyes, you can tell I haven't left my office much in the past couple of weeks. I've been staring intently at my screen, and I've been working on a big, a new website, basically. I am recording this a few days in advance, so I don't know when the website will be public. I'm aiming for mid-September. So that's around about the time this episode will release. So it might be out now, maybe not. Have a look and see. But yeah, I'm very excited for this. There's a lot I have to do still, like testing, making sure it all works okay. But yeah, basically I am kind of merging the public website and the members website. So it's all going to be on the same website. That's the goal. And it's going to be much easier for people to use, whether you are viewing the show notes or you are a member of Level Up English. I think it's very exciting. And yeah, there's going to be some really good changes there as well. You wouldn't believe the amount of work I've put into it. Like literally some days I've been 12 hours sat down working on it, and it has been really fun, creating something, using your creativity to build a website is a really fun thing to do. That the possibilities are endless. You can do so much with a website. It's like a work of art, maybe in some ways. So it's really fun, but it's a lot of work. And, there are so many, we have hundreds and hundreds of lessons on Level Up English that it takes a long time. I have to go through every lesson individually and transfer them over to the new website, which, as you can imagine, is a time-consuming process. So that takes a long time. I've also been working on Level 3, which is the highest, the newest membership plan on Level Up English. And we've had a lot of interest in that, and I've been working one-to-one with a lot of you, some of my new students now, so we've been having one-to-one classes and coaching sessions, and it's been really fun, and hopefully they are enjoying it as well. So if you're interested in Level 3, I think at the moment there are still like 7 places available if you want to join. After 7 places get filled up, it will be closed for a while. So yeah, if you do want to join, you've got to be in that first 7 when you hear this. And we can do one-to-one coaching and more benefits as well. And yet, along with the new website, I'm also doing a rebrand, which you may have seen already. So you can see the podcast artwork. I've got a new color scheme, a new logo, new things like that. So I'm very excited about this. I think it looks much better, more inviting, more friendly, more eye-catching. I like it a lot. Hope you do as well. If you don't like it, don't tell me, because I don't want to change it anymore. So I guess that's the main update with me. I have quite a few things I'm working on, but the new website is the main one. And sadly, I don't have any new reviews on Apple Podcasts today. So if you want your review to be read out by me next episode, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. There's also a link. If you go to the podcast page, there's a little button further down that says leave a review, and that will take you directly to the review page, if that's easier. So they do help me a lot. But I also like to read the Spotify comments when I am, when I ran out of reviews. So I'm going to read a couple from the recent episodes. This is from episode 340 from Diana. Diana says, amazing content, a variety of topics which are not confined to English language learning. And it makes the podcast more interesting and casual. It's like I'm listening to a story from Friends. I can immerse in the listening. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much, Diana. That's a great compliment. I love podcasts where it feels like you listen to a friend, and I'm glad you feel that way with this one as well. Juan left a comment on 339 and said, "Hello, it's amazing. I always learn with you. Greetings from Nicaragua." That is a cool country that I haven't really heard much about in terms of the comments and reviews. So I'm glad you're listening all the way over there in Nicaragua. That's cool. And I'm looking for some new ones as well. We've got 337 from that episode. We had one from Azizbek, who said, "Hi Michael, I'm from Uzbekistan. I really enjoy your podcast. It helps me a lot with improving my English. I hope one day you can visit Uzbekistan. It's a beautiful country with rich culture and very friendly people." That's so kind of you, and I would love to. I've heard a little bit about Uzbekistan and some of the other stands as well, and I've heard they are beautiful and relatively unspoiled by tourism, can we say? That they don't have too many international tourists, which I think maybe makes them even nicer, right? A lot of people don't actually visit there. So I'd love to visit one day. Maybe you can give me some advice on where to go and some tips, because it is such a new part of the world for me. I wouldn't know where to start. But yeah, one day I will make it, I'm sure. So yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much to the reviews. I just want to end now with a quote from Emily Post about manners. "Manners are a sensitive awareness of the feelings of others. If you have that awareness, you have good manners, no matter what fork you use." So I think this quote is getting at being polite and having good manners is much more about awareness of other people rather than exactly what you say or what fork you're using at the dinner table, or whether your elbows are on the table or not. I think the most important thing when you want to be polite is having the awareness of respecting other people and their desires, right? I totally agree with that. Even if you can't express yourself in English very well, your manners will come across if you have that awareness. Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Very long episode. I don't know how I got so carried away, but thank you for watching or listening, and I will see you next time. Goodbye. You have been listening to the Level Up English podcast. If you would like to leave a question to be answered on a future episode, then please go to levelupenglish.school/podcast. That's levelupenglish.school/podcast. And I'll answer your question on a future episode. Thanks for listening.